All right, so what we worked on before break and your assignment yesterday was you are given two equations, and then you had to figure out where they crossed. You had to solve them, and we solved them by graphing. So like if you were given this problem, you would have to change both of these from standard form to slope-intercept form, and then graph them, and then see where they cross. All right, but that's a lot of work. You have to change things around, you have to graph, then you have to figure out where they cross. Whereas what if we didn't want to graph it? Or what if we didn't have graph paper? We're going to learn today how you would solve it by using substitution. We're going to use the substitution method to learn how to solve it by using algebra and just writing it down and solving the equation. So if I give you this equation, if you've got 2x plus 3y equals 12, so 2x plus 3y equals 12, and then x plus y equals 5, I want to know where would these two equations cross. Maybe they don't cross. Maybe it's no solution. Maybe they won't cross. Maybe it's infinite solution. Maybe they cross at every single point. All right, so that's what we're going to want to figure out. And what we do is we follow these steps to the substitution method. So what I need you to do is get a piece of paper and you need to write these steps down. This is going to make it much easier to solve the problems, much easier to make sure you get done with your work quicker, makes it much easier to make sure that it becomes more natural when you're doing these problems, is to write the steps down so you can follow them. All right, so that's a big thing. Make sure you're writing these down. So substitution method. Very first thing we're going to do, we get two equations, and then the very first thing is you're going to isolate one of the variables, x or y. So what that means is you're going to look at the two equations and you're going to pick one of them to solve to get it set up as either x equals or y equals. You want the x or the y by itself. Now, good thing is on a lot of these problems, that's already going to be done for you. So you'll be able to just look at it. Step one will be done. For example, if I give you this example we're going to talk about in a minute down here, if I give you this problem, step one, isolate. Oh, well, the first equation already has y by itself. So for this one, you wouldn't have to do anything because it's already set up for you. But when you look at the problem over here, I don't have x or y on the same side by itself. So step one, make sure that if you didn't write it down, you pause the video and write that down. Step one, isolate one of the variables, either your y or your x. All right, so if I look, what would be easier? Would it be easier to take the top equation and solve the top one for get the x by itself or the y by itself? Or would it be easier to do the bottom equation and get either x or y by itself? So the easiest thing to do is look at all your x's and y's and see, does either equation have an x or a y with no number in front of it so that it's just a 1? That makes it so much easier to solve for. So if you look at the second equation, the x has just a 1 in front of it, the y has just a 1. There's nothing in front of them, so those would be the easiest ones to solve. So I would look at this second equation and solve it for either x or y. So if I look at this, let's say I will, don't want to use that. All right, look at this equation. So let's say I'm going to take the bottom one, x plus y equals 5, and I want to solve it and get the x by itself. You could get the y by itself, doesn't matter which one, but let's say I want to get the x by itself. So then how do I get the x by itself? I've got to move the y to the other side. How do you do that? You subtract it because it's plus y. So I'm left with x equals, and if I take a y and move it to the other side, it becomes 5 and then just minus y. It was a positive y, we moved it to the other side, so it became a minus y. All right, so step one, solve for x or y. So step one, we got that finished. We looked at the problem, we saw which one was easier to get the x or y by itself, and we did that. Step two, substitute the expression from step one. So take the answer we got from step one and substitute it into the other equation and then simplify. All right, so then at this point you have only x's or y's now. So let's see what that means. So we're going to take the answer we got and substitute it into the other equation. So pause the video, write that step down, and then we'll look at it with our example. All right, so what that means is we are going to take what we got. So we got x equals 5 minus y. And what we're going to do is substitute that into the other equation. So instead of having x, we're going to take wherever the x is, and we're going to put this instead. So if we look up here in the equation, our x is right there. So what we're going to do is basically just flip-flop these. We're going to take this and put it where the x is. Because right now I have an x and a y. So I can't solve the equation when I have an x and a y both on there. I got to get rid of one of them. So if I take what x equals and I substitute that in, then I'll have just y's in the equation. So let's look at that. So we have this equation, so you're going to write the exact same equation, but instead of having an x there, we're going to put whatever is right here. So we've got 2 times x. So instead of 2 times x, we'll have 2 times whatever's here, and then plus 3y equals 12, whatever the equation is. So it's the exact same equation. This is the exact same thing I had here, but instead of an x, I'm going to put what x equaled. Okay, so I know it sounds kind of confusing, but once you get used to doing it, it'll be easy, because all we did was look at it and say, okay, x equals 5 minus y. So x is the same thing as 5 minus y. So since it's the same thing as that, I can take the x out and replace it with that. So all I'm doing is saying, okay, take out the x and put 5 minus y in its place. So now look, instead of having an x and a y, I have only y's. So now if I solve this, I can figure out what y equals. Remember, the whole goal is figuring out what is the spot where they cross. So if I want to know where they cross, I need to know what is my x, what is my y. So that's the whole point of what we're doing. We're trying to figure out what our x equals and what our y equals. So if we solve this, distributive property, 2 times 5 is 10, 2 times a minus y, so that's like a negative 1. So 2 times negative 1 is negative 2y plus 3y equals 12. And remember, our step here was to substitute it into the other equation and simplify. All right, so we substituted it in, and now we're simplifying this equation. So we did distributive property. Now, can I combine any like terms on this side? Yep, I can combine a negative 2y and a 3y. So I've got 10. And then what is negative 2y plus 3y? If I'm at negative 2y's and I add 3y's, I now just have plus 1y, which is just y, equals 12. Now how do I get the y by itself? Subtract 10. So subtract 10 from both sides. So now all I have is y equals 12 minus 10 is 2. So first step, our first goal is done. We need to, the whole point is to figure out, okay, where do they cross? What does x equal? What does y equal? And now we know, well, y is 2. So we can put that there. We know y is 2. We still got to figure out what x is. All right. So step 1, isolate the variable. We did that. Steps 2, substitute it in and simplify. We did that. And then we actually already did step 3, solve the equation. So that's what we did down here. We substituted in, we simplified it, and we solved it. So we actually went ahead and did step 3, so you can write that down. Step 3 was to solve it. So we substituted in, solved the equation, and now the only thing left now we've got to substitute the result from step 3. So take that answer. So y equals 2. So we know y equals 2. And we're going to substitute 2 in to either of the original equations to solve it. All right, so you can write that down. You're going to substitute the result from step 3 into either of the original equations and solve, which is a lot simpler than it sounds. Basically, all that means is we're going to look up here and say, okay, x equals 2. So we're going to put that in to one of the equations. I mean, x equals 2, but y equals 2. So we're going to put that into one of the equations. Which equation looks easier to deal with? This equation has less numbers, so it will be easier. So x plus y equals 5. And now we know what? We know, oh, well, y equals 2. So we know we can just write x plus, instead of y, we know we can put 2 there, equals 5. So now solve that equation. Subtract 2 from both sides. So x, 2 minus 2 is gone. So x equals 5 minus 2 is 3. So x is 3. And then once you have that, you can just, and that's the last step over here. Is to just write your solution. Write the solution as an ordered pair. All right, so what that means is, you can pause the video if you need to and write that down. But then all that means is we just take our answer and write it as an ordered pair. So x is 3, y is 2. So that's our answer right there. That's the answer. So basically, what we could have done, what we did yesterday in class, was you would have changed these two equations, found the slope, found the y-intercept, graph them, figure out where they cross, and write that point. But instead, we did that same exact thing by solving the equation. And we figured out what would that point be if I graphed them, where would they cross? They would cross at the point 3, 2. All right, so if you want to make sure you have that example, you can write it down, pause the video. I'm getting ready to erase it, and I'll go through another example with you. So, like I said, if you need to pause it, you can, but that's all we did. Step 1, we picked one of the equations, solved it for x or y. We picked the bottom one, solved it for x. Then we substitute that into the other equation. We did that, solve it, and then take that answer and substitute it into one of the original equations to get your other one. All right, so let's look at another problem. So let's say we have this problem right here. Y equals 2x minus 1, 3x plus 2y equals 26. So I give you that equation. It says to solve it, what are we going to do? Well, first thing we got to do is isolate, look at the two equations, solve one of them for x or y. Good thing is when we look at these two, do I have either x or y by itself? Yeah, I already have y by itself. So first step, it's already done for us. It's already solved for y. So we've got y equals 2x minus 1. It's already finished. So then the next step, substitute. So I'm going to take 2x minus 1 and substitute it into the other equation where the y is. So where's the y? The y is right there. So I'm going to take this and put it where the y is. So that's the second step. Take what you get, put it where that is. So we're going to substitute it in for the y. So if we look, that's what we would get. We take 3x, so we have 3x plus 2, and then times, and instead of a y, we have 2x minus 1. So all we did was put that right in there. We just plopped that right in where the y was, and then equals 26. So now the next step is to solve the equation. So how do we solve this? We got to do the distributive property. So 2 times 2x is 4x. 2 times minus 1 is minus 2. So then next step, combine like terms. 3x plus 4x is 7x. Now we just have a regular equation to solve. We have a -2. How do we get rid of a -2? Add 2 to the other side. So 7x equals 28. This part's all something we've already learned, we've already done. You should remember how to do it. How do I get rid of the 7? Divide by 7. 28 divided by 7. X equals 4. So here's one of those things where if you still struggle with solving equations, you're going to have some trouble with this. So that's the whole reason we reviewed solving equations, which was a 7th grade topic earlier in the year. We reviewed it to make sure you remembered how to do it. So 28 divided by 7 gives us 4. So x equals 4. So next step, substitute. We're going to take the 4 and put it in to one of the original equations. So all we're going to do is take the 4 and we're going to put it in where the x was. So instead of having an x here, we're going to replace that x with a 4. So take the 4, put it in one of your original equations. So instead of 2x minus 1, I now have y equals 2 times 4 minus 1. So then 2 times 4 is 8, minus 1. 8 minus 1 is 7. So x is 4, y is 7. So what's my answer? 4, 7. All right, and that's it. So take some getting used to doing it, but if you follow the steps, if you got them wrote down, shouldn't be a problem. So what I'm going to do right now is go over some of the problems from your assignment. So your assignment's going to be Algebra 1, U8, solve systems of equations using substitution, and they start off by giving you some pretty easy ones. So like if we look, first problem they give you, pretty simple. If we go through our steps, we've got 3x plus 6y equals 3, y equals 1. First step was to solve one of them for x or y, and the bottom one's already solved for y. So we already know, remember the whole goal is to figure out what does x equal, what does y equal. Well, the beginning problems really help us out because they start off giving you what one of them equals. So y equals 1. So since we already know y equals 1, all we really have to do now is substitute the 1 into the original equation for the y. So then we have 3x plus 6 times, instead of times y, it's times 1, equals 3. All right, so that's our first thing we've got. Now we can go ahead and solve that equation. So we've got 3x, 6 times 1 is 6, plus 6, equals 3. So then solve the equation, subtract 6 from both sides. 3x equals 3 minus 6 would be negative 3. Divide both sides by 3. X equals negative 1. So x is negative 1. So then all we're going to do is take that, write it as an ordered pair. So what's x? Negative 1. What's y? 1. And then that would be your answer to the problem. So negative 1, 1. All right. And then they give us another one. And what I'm going to do is pause the video, do some of these problems to get to some harder ones, and then we'll look at some of those together. So let me pause it, and then I'll be right back. All right, so if we look at this one, so look at that. You have those pretty easy ones all the way up to a score of, I'm at 47 now, and they give you these two equations. So it's copy, paste over here. And let's take a look. Now, if you feel like, oh, I remember how to do this, this is good, no problem, you go ahead and end the video, comment on it, get your points, that's fine. But if you still want some practice, you can keep watching. So here we go. First, we have this equation. First step, pick one of these out, solve for x or y. Good thing you notice when you look at these, though, is that they're both already solved for y. So they already have y by itself. So it doesn't matter which one you pick. So let's say I'm just going to use the top one. So I've got y equals 5x plus 4. And what am I going to do? I'm going to take smaller. I'm going to take what y equals. So y equals 5x plus 4. And I'm going to put it into the other equation for the y. So that's all you're doing. First step, solve, get one of them equal to y. It's already done for us, so it's already equal. We got the y by itself. So now take that, substitute it into the other equation. So instead of y, I've got 5x plus 4 equals negative x minus 2. All I did was take this and put it where that was. And the whole reason that we do that is because up here we have an x and a y, so I can't figure out what x or y is because I have both of them still. But now down here I only have what? I only have x's. All right, so solve the equation. We got x on both sides, so we know we got to get rid of one of those. So remember, it's always easier to get rid of the smaller one. So how do you get rid of a minus x? Add x to both sides. So I've got 6x plus 4 equals negative 2. All right, so now I have to get the x by itself, so subtract 4 from both sides. 6x, 4 minus 4 is 0, so it's gone, equals negative 2 minus 4 is negative 6. Divide both sides by 6. So x is equal to negative 6 divided by 6 is negative 1. So remember, our goal is to get x and y, figure out what those are. So we already got x equals negative 1. So we know x equals negative 1. So our next step is to, let me fix that. Our next step is to take that answer and substitute it back into either of the original problems. So if I look up there, I'm just going to substitute it back into the first one. So I've got y equals 5x plus 4. And now I'm going to rewrite it, but instead of x, I'm going to replace the x with negative 1. So y equals 5 times negative 1 plus 4. So then y equals 5 times negative 1 is negative 5 plus 4. And then y equals, what is negative 5 plus 4? It is negative 1. So negative 1. And on this one, we end up with the same thing for both our x and y. So our answer would be these two equations, if I graph them, they would cross at negative 1, negative 1. So if you have questions, let me know. Come to the Google Meets. I'm there to help you. Tomorrow's assignment, if you want to go ahead and get started on it, is Algebra 1, U8, solve systems of equations, all right, which is the ones that I was just working on. So up to 47, you have the super easy ones. Then you'll start getting some where it's already solved for y for you, and then you can stop when you get to 70. So if you have any questions, let me know. Other than that, good job.